middle of the day with us every single weekday. We are having a little bit of a problem with our cameras, but we are trying to work on that and get that straightened out as best we can. In the meantime, thank you for being here, and thank you for joining us every single weekday on the AFA Today broadcast. Yesterday, a fantastic time in the auspices of the American Bible Society, and I just want to say thank you to them again for hosting us. What a beautiful location and what a great time we had. Chatting with Senator Rick Santorum and pastor and author, best-selling author Max Lucado. I hope that you found that as enjoyable as we did in being able to bring that to you. Our phone number, very simple, 888-589-8840. I want to get right into a couple of things that are newsish for today's purposes. There's a very important observation that is going on today. 150 years ago this day, a president was making his way to a battlefield in Pennsylvania, just about 65 miles outside of the nation's capital. And why this is important? Well, we can't really fully appreciate or understand, I guess, given the nature of what modern America looks like and what it means. The president. It's Kevin McCullough, glad to be with you. The president addressed the people gathered there that day by saying the following 4 paragraphs. This is all from the mouth and pen of then President Abraham Lincoln. 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war, and we have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here have consecrated it already, far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, and by the people, and for the people, shall not perish from this earth. Abraham Lincoln, November the 19th, 1863. I have a very simple proposition today, friend. This is what I want to know. Have we fulfilled the mission that we who were left behind, that we who were here dedicated to the great task that remained in front of us, have we accomplished that mission? There's much that we could talk about in many different ways, but friends, on this day, the 150th observance of this speech, I'm curious as to what your thoughts are about where we've come from, how far we have yet to go, and if we think we'll ever get there fully. 1-888-589-8840. I want to know your thoughts. 888-589-8840. Abraham Lincoln gave that speech today, 150 years ago, but today, 0 years ago, it was not important enough for our president to attend. Dan Pfeiffer, one of the communications guys for the White House, said today in a series of extraordinary tweets back and forth with people that were paying attention that the whole website thing related to the idea of Obamacare was keeping the president occupied and unable to be part of. The Weekly Standard wrote it this way. Barack Obama advisor Dan Pfeiffer says the president won't be attending the Gettysburg Address anniversary because of the whole website thing. He appears to be talking about the ongoing problems with the Obamacare website, healthcare.gov. Pfeiffer made the comments today in a Twitter exchange with a couple of reporters. Ron Fournier was one of those reporters, and he said, curious, Pfeiffer, 44, why not honor Gettysburg with a presidential visit? Also, Jeff Solnit of, I don't know what outlet he writes for, but he responded to Ron Fournier by saying, because if POTUS spoke, someone at National Journal would speculate if he's using the moment for politics. Obviously, this is someone defending the president, going back and forth with the ruse of being funny. But eventually, Dan Pfeiffer, the White House person, did speak. He said, it didn't work schedule-wise. Mr. Fournier then says, serious question, what is on his schedule that is more important than the Gettysburg Address? And Dan Pfeiffer responded, oh, I don't know. There's this whole website thing that someone suggested might destroy the Democratic Party. Your thoughts on the glibness with which this discussion took place between these reporters. Your thoughts on the text and the importance of the Gettysburg Address. Is there an eternal something that should be observed every year? Importance of that text that I read to you as we were opening the broadcast. But the bigger question is: Are we fulfilling the vision that Abraham Lincoln had when he went there to consecrate that ground? That ground that ran red with the blood of patriots on both sides that were fighting for things that they believed were right at the time. When the Gettysburg battle was done, there were more than 50,000 that had been wounded and more than 8,000 dead in that battle alone. That's more dead, by the way, than two 9/11s put together. And you saw what the loss of 3,000 plus people did to our country. I can't imagine the incredible, tremendous sadness that had to be weighing on President Lincoln as he rode up to the place where he gave that brief, again, 4 paragraphs only, address. The 150th observance and anniversary of the Gettysburg Address. I'm curious if it means anything, if it makes any difference this day, if it should have been more important than the website thing, as the White House called it, referring to healthcare.gov. Should this president have gone the 65 miles from Washington, D.C., because it is no different today than it was when Abraham Lincoln did it, should he have gone the 65 miles to join the observance and to be there as tens of thousands of people are this day? I'm curious as to your thoughts on all of the above. 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. Let's go to the phones before we take our next break and speak with Tom from Virginia. Tom, welcome. You're on with Kevin McCullough. So glad that you're with us. Hi.
Hey, good morning, sir. Thank you for taking my call.
Sure thing.
Hey, I just wanted to make a brief comment about this Obamacare. There's been a lot of questions arising as to exactly how far he's going to take it. And if you go on YouTube and look up the RFID chip, you will actually see that it has the links to that subject, the RFID chip, has grown substantially. I noticed back about 2.5 years ago, I was on there.
Hey, Tom, I got a question for you, and I don't mean to be rude, but what do you think about what we're talking about?
Concerning the Gettysburg Address?
Yes.
Yeah, that's just absurd for a president of the United States to disregard that to any matter at all. And
what do you think personally? What do you think personally about the importance of the address and what President Lincoln said, and whether or not we're living up to that today?
No, we are not living up to that today. Not with this administration, we're not.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you being here. 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. Kevin McCullough, glad to take your calls. It is an interesting day historically. 150 years ago, the president took a train to a certain extent. Then he couldn't take the train any further. He had to get off. He had to go on horseback If you've read biographies of Lincoln, you've read to some degree some historical authors' speculation about what it looked like, about what it felt like. But the true importance of whether or not on this day, 150 years ago, what many believe to be one of the more important speeches given by an American president could be observed and understood. It was the calling to an end of the greatest single crisis of our nation's history. It was a calling to an end of the only American-on-American bloodshed that we've ever seen. In the day which we live right now, you hear a lot of people talk about whether or not we're going to see another revolution take place and turn an American against another American. There's many people that speculate about this administration wanting to instigate social unrest so as to create the beginning of another revolution. But what we had in the Civil War, what we had at that moment, was the actual reality of an American turning on American and one brother fighting against another brother. And there was confusion as to why people fought on different sides. I don't know that it's as simple as saying that the North was simply for liberating all men and the South was against it. But that is certainly an element to it that was considerably influential into the discussion. And I'm glad that the North won. I think it's important to understand that all men are created equal, and that as Lincoln himself wanted to see this evolution of the body politic in America take place, that he desperately wanted to see black brothers and sisters have their freedoms and liberties established as permanent. And what's very interesting about this historically is and I wrote about this in my first book, is you go into a period of time following this address and following the end of this war, typically called Reconstruction, but it was the rebuilding of the country after the Great Civil War. And you had a number of people from the former slave ranks of America's population become federally elected, state elected, and locally elected leaders of government. You saw people with a tremendous articulation of issues and the ability to hold conversation, and not only that, persuade voters to vote for them. I sometimes wonder if those early folks that were elected in those positions, I sometimes wonder what they would look like, how they would feel if they looked upon our entitlement society now. The fact that as former slaves, some of them became federally elected legislators, that they became legislators on the state level, and they ran governments in cities and regions and counties and states, and even some in Washington, D.C. And they look at where the state of things are in America today, and they see the abortion rates, they see the poverty rates, they see the illiteracy, and they see some of the problems that are there. I wonder if President Lincoln's admonition is still viable. Something to wonder about. I'm Kevin McCullough. This is AFA Today on AFR Talk, and we are glad to have you with us. 150 years ago, the Gettysburg Address was proclaimed for the first time. The president is not going to hear it today. He is not going there. And another update when we continue, when he recently re-recorded the text of it, he left out a very important part. Get your thought on that when we continue, plus your calls on AFA Today here on AFR Talk.